Hello everyone, welcome to Chaos Archives, and I'm here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching? Now get comfortable and relax. I found my missing brother on a forum for the dead. I never thought much about online forums until one of them brought my brother back. Ryan had been missing for 2 years. One day, he went out to grab coffee and never came back. No suspicious activity on his bank account, no weird phone calls, no signs of struggle, just gone. The police said he'd likely been abducted, but without evidence, they couldn't do much. My family fell apart. My mom stopped eating, my dad stopped talking, and I just stopped feeling. Late one night, while spiraling through forums about unsolved disappearances, I stumbled upon a thread titled Messages from Beyond Connecting with the Lost. It was buried deep within an obscure corner of the internet and full of people claiming to receive messages from the dead. It sounded ridiculous, but one comment caught my attention. A user named Echoing Void posted, "Sometimes the missing don't know they're gone. Sometimes they're here, looking for home." Below, someone replied, "How do you know?" And Void answered, "Because I am one." For whatever reason, grief, desperation, or lack of sleep, I created an account and messaged Void. I typed, "If you're really one of the missing, prove it. Tell me something only you would know." The response came within minutes. "What do you want me to prove? That you once broke Ryan's nose during a stupid fight over a game of Mario Kart? That he forgave you before you forgave yourself?" My stomach dropped. I hadn't told anyone about that, not even my parents. It was just one of those childhood moments you carry like a secret scar. I asked, "Who are you?" Void's reply, "I think you know." The next few weeks were a blur. I spent hours every night talking to Void. He said the world he was in was a fractured reflection of ours, familiar but empty. The sky was always gray, the streets abandoned, the air heavy with silence. He couldn't explain how he got there, only that he woke up in this place and couldn't leave. The more we talked, the more he sounded like Ryan. He even remembered details no one else could, like the nickname he used to call our childhood dog, or how he'd secretly taped my embarrassing middle school dance recital to blackmail me later. One night, Void said something that terrified me. He typed, "They're watching me now. They don't like that I'm talking to you." I asked who they were, but his responses became cryptic. "The shadows. The ones who keep us here. They don't like noise." That was the last I heard from him for weeks. Then, a new message appeared in my inbox. "Do you want to see me?" Attached was a link to a live video feed. I hesitated but clicked. The stream showed a dimly lit street that looked eerily like the one Ryan and I grew up on. The houses were distorted, their shapes wavering as if viewed through heat haze. In the distance, a figure walked toward the camera. As they drew closer, I recognized his face. It was Ryan, but something was off. His eyes were too wide, his movements stiff, like a puppet on strings. He smiled at the camera, but it wasn't the smile I remembered. It was forced, unnatural. He raised a hand and waved. In the live chat beside the video, he typed, "It's me. I told you I was here." I couldn't move. My heart felt like it was trying to escape my chest. Suddenly, the camera shook violently. The shadows behind Ryan began to shift and ripple, forming towering figures with jagged edges. They moved closer, their distorted limbs reaching for him. Ryan typed, "They're coming. You have to help me find the door." The feed cut out. I spent the next few days piecing together everything he'd said about his world, looking for clues about the door. It wasn't much, but he'd mentioned a specific place from our childhood. An old, abandoned cabin in the woods where we used to play. I drove there, half expecting nothing. The cabin was just as we'd left it, rotting and overgrown. Inside, I found a trapdoor beneath a threadbare rug. The ladder below led to a tunnel that stretched on for what felt like miles. At the end was a heavy iron door with strange carvings. As I touched it, my phone buzzed. A message from Void. They know you're here. Don't let them in. Before I could reply, the shadows began to seep through the walls, crawling toward me like living tar. I shoved the door open and stepped through. I don't know how to explain what happened next. One moment, I was in the tunnel. The next, I was standing in the gray, empty world Ryan had described. The air was heavy, the silence deafening. And there he was, standing a few feet away, staring at me with wide, desperate eyes. "Ryan," I whispered. But before he could respond, the shadows surged forward. The last thing I remember is his scream. I woke up in my bed the next morning, clutching a piece of paper I'd never seen before. Written on it, in Ryan's handwriting, were the words, "Don't stop looking. There's another door." I can't remember how I met my best friend. Kaylee has been my best friend for as long as I can remember. For me, that's not a figure of speech. I literally can't remember how I met her. I can't find any photos of me with her before 3rd grade, so I guess I met her around then. Strangely, though, she's not in any of my class photos. I remember her coming over my house all the time, but I don't ever remember going to hers. These things never struck me as weird until a few days ago, when I really sat down and thought about them. Some things in life you just sort of accept as fact, right? They've gone on so long you don't remember how they started. Like how I always put eggs on the top shelf of the fridge, or how I always tuck my blanket under my feet before going to bed. I don't remember how it started. I've just always done it that way, as long as I can remember. So, how did I meet her? I don't remember. They say if you lose your sight, you don't see pitch black, or nothingness, or a void. You just have the absence of sight. That's how it is for me with Kaylee. There's no remnant of a memory, nothing on the tip of my tongue. It just isn't there. A few days ago, I asked her about it. "Do you remember how we met?" "What do you mean?" she asked, her smile faltering. "Well, we met when I was around 8, right? But you went to a different school. So, how did we meet?" "It was at that summer camp, wasn't it?" she asked. "With the bottle rockets?" "I don't think so. I'd only gone one summer, and I was pretty sure that was the summer after 4th grade. "Church, then." "Which church?" Kaylee paused. "The one off Main Street with the steeple." "Which one?" "Oh, I'm not sure. You know I'm not religious," she said with a laugh. "The one on the corner or on Elm Street?" She paused. "Elm, I think." "Well, my parents took me to St. Paul's on the corner," I said. "So it couldn't have been church." "Huh," she said, shrugging. "Then I don't know how we met." It was weird. She seemed confused, and yet it almost felt like she was playing the role of a fortune teller, throwing out vague answers and hoping I'd jump in with more details. "So, you don't remember how we met?" I said, with finality. "I guess I don't." She shook her head, her bleach blonde hair shaking around her face. "Isn't that silly? We've been best friends for 10 years, and we can't even remember how we met." I wanted to ask her more, but then my roommate got home, and my roommate is a bit persnickety, so we decided to quietly watch a movie in my room to give her some peace. It seemed weird to bring up again. I was probably overthinking things. That night, however, I couldn't sleep. As Kaylee slept peacefully on the futon in the common area, I lay wide awake in my bed. Why can't I remember? And then a thought occurred to me. Someone else must remember. I went on Facebook and clicked over to our 21 mutual friends. I started scrolling, making a mental list of who was most likely to know. But then a sudden realization hit me. Each of these friends I'd introduced to her. None of these were her friends originally. They were all mine. I squinted at the screen. How does that make sense? Has she really never introduced me to her friends? And now that I thought about it, she was always visiting me at my dorm, making the 2-hour drive. She offered because I was broke and couldn't afford the gas. But maybe there was more to it than that. Why had I never thought about this before? I scrolled back through my Facebook photos to some childhood photos I'd posted. Kaylee was in them, sure as day. She looked different. Her hair wasn't bleached then. Her face was chubbier, but from the dimples to the sharp chin, it was her. I clicked back on her Facebook page and scrolled, and that's when I realized something. Every single post involved me or one of our 21 mutual friends. I didn't see a single tag by someone I didn't know. Well, that could be the privacy settings, couldn't it? Like her friends who've tagged her have made the post only visible to their friends or mutuals or something, but not a single post? It was like her entire life revolved around me. Like every single event in her life was related to me, directly or indirectly. I gave up on sleep. I got out of bed and walked into the common room, grabbing a Coke from the mini fridge. Kaylee was sleeping soundly on the futon. I glanced over at her, my heart pounding. Her pale skin was blue in the light from the microwave clock. Muffled music came from my roommate's room. She was still up. With my mind racing and no one else to talk to, I went over. "Can I come in for a second?" I called quietly through the door. As soon as she opened it, I darted inside. "There's something weird about Kaylee." Isabel scoffed. Yeah, duh." "What?" "She's weird, always has been. You just noticing this now?" I frowned at her. "Okay, sorry. That came out really mean, but it's true. She's just weird. I wish she wouldn't come over every weekend, but since you're really good about Ben coming over, I never say anything." "She doesn't come over every weekend," I huffed. "It's been a lot. I mean, she was here homecoming weekend, then those 2 weekends in October, then Halloween." "She wasn't here Halloween," I protested. "Oh yes, she was," Isabel replied. "Ben and I had to go over to his place because she was here with you." I shook my head. Remember, she wasn't here Halloween. We stared at each other. Isabel's irritation melted to confusion. She wasn't here. I had COVID, remember? But I saw her. When we came back from the Beta Theta Pi party, she was here. We had to go to Ben's place. The room started to tilt around me. I remember being so sick that weekend, in and out of sleep half the day. But she was here? Without me knowing? "You must have gotten the weekends confused," I said weakly. "No, I remember it clearly, because we were both in our costumes. Do you know how itchy that Harley Quinn wig is? Kaylee must have let herself in. But why?" Now that I thought about it, that weekend, there had been some weird stuff. I'd chalked it up to delirium at the time, but I remember not being able to find my phone. My milk was missing from the fridge. I thought it had been Isabel or Ben, but it had been Kaylee. She was here, watching me sleep. What the fuck? I was jolted out of my thoughts by a thump outside, coming from the common room. "Kaylee," I whispered. The footsteps, slow and deliberate, started down the hall. My door creaked open. She's looking for me. I ran over to the door and locked it. I held a finger to my lips, standing absolutely still. So still I could hear the blood pulsing in my ears. The footsteps started back up. into the common room, and then towards our door, getting louder. Isabel glanced down and her eyes went wide. "She's right there," Isabel mouthed to me. The footsteps stopped. The door handle made a ratcheting sound as Kaylee tried to turn it. Once, twice, 3 times. "Haley, are you in there?" I held my breath. "Isabel?" I closed my eyes. She'll just go away. She'll think Isabel's asleep and I just stepped out. Isabel's computer is on, but it's dark in here, so we're fine. I took in a slow, quiet breath. We're fine. She's just going to go back to sleep. 1, 2, 3, 4. "I know you're in there," a raspy whisper, unlike anything I'd heard Kaylee say, and it was coming from the crack under the door. I could feel her breath against my ankles. Isabel clapped a hand over her mouth. I took a shaking step away from the door. "Let me in," she whispered. Her slim, pale fingers shot through the crack under the door and swept back and forth, quickly, frantically, trying to grab any part of us she could. "Let me in now." Isabel grabbed her phone off the desk and dialed 911. The fingers retracted, and footsteps sounded in the common room. By the time the police got here, Kaylee was gone. It's been 2 days, and I haven't heard from Kaylee. I think about her every waking minute. I've barely eaten or slept. I keep replaying that night through my head, wondering what she would have done if I hadn't locked the door. I've done my research, though, combed through social media and photo albums and everything. There is no physical evidence that Kaylee existed in my life before a year ago. Because those photos from my childhood? My mom insists I never had a friend named Kaylee. When she dug the old photo albums out of the attic, she wasn't in any of them. Kaylee's face only appeared in the digital scans of the photos I'd posted online. Photos I'd posted in the past year. And those 21 mutual friends. They all met her in the past year, too. She'd made an effort to befriend my friends, find them online. But none of the friendships went back more than a year. I'd checked each and every one. And now, suddenly, I'm having trouble recalling all those memories with her. I can barely remember what she looked like. Blonde hair, pale skin, dimples, I knew that much. But if you showed me a lineup of 10 girls with those qualities, I don't think I'd be able to pick her out. Which leads me to the horrifying conclusion. If she ever finds me again, whether that's in days or years or decades, I won't even know it's her. I'm a psychologist, and my client might be dealing with something more sinister than an eating disorder. "I'm so fat," Lucy mumbled, pinching the stringy flesh stretched taut across the back of her arm. I suppressed a deep sigh. 4 months into therapy, and there hadn't been much of an improvement. I had tried to close therapy with her and refer her out to someone else. I felt guilty taking her money, but she wouldn't have it. I wondered if I should set an ultimatum. If her family still doesn't show up to participate in therapy with her, I'd have to terminate our sessions. I wasn't getting anywhere working with just Lucy. I didn't understand her parents and her older sister. They claimed to care, to love her and want the best for her. Yet, no matter how much I emphasized the importance of their participation in treating her eating disorder, especially since she was still a teenager, they never showed up for therapy. I had only seen them twice, when they had stopped by to pick her up and drop her off. On those occasions, I had pounced on the startled parents and herded them to my office, ignoring their startled annoyance and comments about being tight on time. I had drilled in the importance of family involvement in eating disorder interventions, or thought I did, and extracted promises from them to join in future sessions. But that never materialized. I had never seen her older sister in person, save for her modeling pictures that Lucy had shown me when asked what good enough looked like to her. It must be really painful to see yourself in the mirror and think such harsh, critical thoughts about yourself, I said. I didn't feel like going down the usual route of challenging her thoughts, of testing the reality of her beliefs. We had done those to death. She looked at me and nodded, a heavy shadow settling upon her face, dragging the corners of her lips down. I was running out of ideas. I forced myself to take a beat, to acknowledge, then put aside my rising sense of incompetence. An art session. The thought flit into my mind. It wasn't the gold standard evidence-based treatment for anorexia, but those hadn't worked, so what was there to lose? Lucy loved drawing, especially with charcoal. "Let's draw today," I said, and smiled at the sudden light that suffused her face at my words. "Let's have you draw yourself, how you see yourself. Then, let's have you draw me. I'll draw how I see you and how I see myself, too." I was going off script, but I hoped that somehow, through sharing our drawings and perspectives of each other, I could help her better recognize the distortion in her self-perception. I'm terrible at drawing, but try, I did. She was amazing. Her charcoal sketch of me was simple, but encapsulated the gist of me. Her drawing of herself, though, showed a girl I didn't recognize. It's not that the girl she drew was bigger than she really was, or heavier. It was that the girl looked like someone else entirely. The drawn girl's eyes were wider. Her chin had a slight slant to it. Her cheeks were round, and her hair was curly. My client had one of those symmetrical face shapes with a sharp, centralized chin, gaunt, sallow cheeks, and straight, lanky hair. The body shape was that of a fuller girl as well. I was confused. Did Lucy have more than an eating disorder? Did she have some form of body dysmorphia, where her distorted view of self applied to facial features and other details? "You've drawn in curly hair," I said, gesturing to her limp, straight hair. "Oh, I know I've straight hair," she said, "but the face I see in the mirror has curly hair." "Oh." I chewed on my lip for a second. I spotted a dark mark on the drawn face, right on the cheek. I had assumed it was an accidental stroke of her charcoal pen, but I wasn't so sure anymore. "What's that on your cheek?" I asked, pointing to the drawing. "A scar, I think," she said. I studied her unblemished cheek. "I don't see a scar," I said. "Oh," she frowned. "It appeared one day and I could never scrub it off. I figured it's a scar or pigmentation I must have gotten overnight." "Have you only seen it in the mirror?" I asked, intrigued. She nodded, raising an eyebrow. "Yes?" "I mean, how else would I see it?" she asked, making a show of turning her eyes downwards to her cheeks. "Huh." On a sudden impulse, I asked, "What color are your eyes?" "The eyes you see in the mirror." She blinked. "Hazel." "Do you have hazel eyes?" I wasn't sure what she counted as hazel. Maybe she thought her dark brown, nearly black eyes were hazel. She shrugged. "I didn't, but now I do." It was all I could do to not say, "Interesting," out loud. Maybe she had hallucinations, saw someone that wasn't her. How would that fit in with her case formulation? I had assumed it was an eating disorder. Could it be something else? "How do you look in pictures?" I asked. She stared blankly at me. "I haven't taken a picture in almost 3 years, since my issues began." "Not even one?" I raised my eyebrows. I didn't bother to add that her issues had probably begun long before 3 years ago. "No, this feeling of fear and disgust takes over me when I try to be in a picture," she said. She seemed almost to deflate, crumpling into hunched misery. I felt a pang of sadness, and a sense of protectiveness reared its head. "Let's take one," I said. "Let's prove to yourself how you really look." I prayed that she wouldn't see the completely different self in the photograph, too. Her eyes widened. She seemed about to make excuses to refuse. But then, the resilient girl that she was, she bit her lip and nodded. "It's about time," she said, probably trying to convince herself. Her fists were clenched tight, and her lips, pressed tightly together, had drained of color. Before she could second-guess herself, I whipped out my phone, tapped on the camera icon, and snapped a picture. A guttural cry of pain tore from her throat, and I froze. "Are you okay?" I ventured. She was shaking, and cold sweat beaded her upper lip. I'm fine. There was this shock of..." She shook her head and managed a weak smile. "I'm fine. It just felt painful for a second." I nodded, heart still beating fast. I hadn't expected that big of a reaction. I pulled up the photo on my phone. "There, see how you look for real." She flinched, like I had slapped her, and screwed her eyes shut. "Hey, Lucy." "It's okay." "I'm sorry," she said, eyes still welded shut. "Every time someone wants to show me a photo of me, I feel this terror, it's like I physically can't look, like something is stopping me." "I'm sorry. That's terrible. But I'm here, Lucy. Nothing is stopping you. You are in control. You can do this. You've got this." She shook her head rapidly. "You do, really. It's fine. We can stay here. You can take all the time you need. When you're ready, you can..." Before I could finish my sentence, Lucy had flung her eyes open with a Herculean effort. Her eyebrows shot up, and her jaw slackened. "No way!" she gasped. I look so thin." I felt a thrill of happiness. Finally, she saw it. She scurried over to the mirror. "But here, I look. This isn't me," she said, pointing at her reflection. Thrill continued coursing through my body. Most clients with eating disorders saw the same warped view in the mirror, in reality, and in photographs. The fact that Lucy didn't see the weight issues she thought she had in her photographs could mean a wonderful breakthrough. Finally, "Look," I said, turning to her reflection, while also holding up the photo for her to see. "This is how you really look," I said, waving the phone a little. "Your reflection should reflect that." I trailed off as my voice caught in my suddenly dry throat. I saw her then. The girl Lucy must have been seeing all those long months. The taller, fuller girl, with a mark on her cheek, with curly hair and hazel eyes that were staring balefully at me. The fury in that girl's face seemed to reach out of the mirror, cross the gap between us, and smack me in the chest. I licked my dry lips and slid my eyes to the left. Lucy looked puzzled as she stared at the photo, then at the mirror. I darted a glance back at the mirror, where an enraged face still stared out at me. I shut my eyes and felt my breaths getting shallow. I took a few slow, deep breaths, grateful that Lucy hadn't seemed to notice or to comment on my sudden change in demeanor. I turned to face Lucy and opened my eyes. Her face was drained of blood, and her lips trembled. "Why? Why does it look like that?" she asked, pointing with a shaking finger at the reflection. "She looks so angry. She's not moving as I am, not looking as I..." She swallowed and took a step back. Lucy saw it too. I wasn't going crazy. I risked another glance at the mirror. The girl in the mirror had not stepped back, as Lucy had. "Lucy?" I asked, surprising even myself with how quickly I had accepted the presence of something altogether supernatural. "When you look down at your own body, not through the mirror, do you see that same girl?" I needed to know if we could ditch the mirror and run. If she only saw it in the mirror, then we could find a way to deal with that. She nodded, and my heart dropped. She looked down and pinched her waist. "I see the fats," she said. The girl in the mirror scowled. Lucy jumped back, as did I. The girl in the mirror stayed scowling, head forward, as if eager to pounce. I grabbed Lucy by the shoulders. "Lucy, we have a problem, and I don't think it's anorexia." I interrupted myself with a scream and leapt back. I couldn't see Lucy's face anymore, not just in the mirror. As I held her, all I saw was the other girl's face. And she was glaring straight into my skull, eyes burning with hatred. I backed away, eyes darting to the door of the office. I cursed myself for seating myself nearer the inner wall of the office rather than the door. Basic safety strategy 101, but I had ignored it, thinking my clients mostly harmless. Dumb move. And why did I work on a day when my admin was on leave? Could anyone hear me if I screamed for help? "You will not cure her," the girl said. "She does not deserve to be cured. She deserves to hate herself, the way I hated myself." This was bad. We were either faced with a supernatural possession, haunting, or Lucy and I were sharing a visual and auditory hallucination, with Lucy also probably having a dissociated identity, some part of her that surfaced unbidden. I couldn't afford to be losing my license, so I convinced myself it was the former. "Who are you? What is your relationship with Lucy?" The girl sneered. "I'm no friend of hers. We have no relationship." "How do you know her? Why do you stick to her?" No answer. There must have been something. I gulped and made myself study the face of the girl. She seemed to be a teenager. She couldn't have been more than 14, 15 years old. "You don't seem to be a bad person, or unreasonable," I said. I had to do some mental gymnastics to see the girl with the malevolent eyes and cruel smirk as just a teenage girl, likely one who had been hurt. I needed to convince myself of my words so I could infuse authenticity, sincerity into them. The girl blinked. She seemed slightly taken aback. "She deserves to hurt," she said after a pause, bitterness coating her words. "What did she do?" The girl was silent for a while. Then her expression cracked, and a look of pure fear broke through. Lucy's features followed. "Help! I can't." Lucy gasped as if breaking above the water surface for a first breath in a long time. Then she dipped back below, and the other girl's face came back into focus. She snarled. I waited. "She was nice to me. Her friend was a bitch, nasty bitch," the girl spat. "But at least she wasn't fake like sweet little Lucy," she sneered. "Whatever happened must have hurt you deeply," I said. The girl blinked again. She seemed thrown off. She continued, her tone still taut with anger, but some of the edge had washed off. Christy was a bitch, mean to my face. Called me names. Chubby choom choom, fat ass, lard face. She was disgusting. Again, Christy's a fake name. Confidentiality and all. I frowned. Fucking teenagers. The girl before me was fuller, more fleshed out than the waifish clients I often saw, but that didn't make her look bad. She was pretty. Even with her features contorted in anger, I could see the beauty in them. I imagined her hazel eyes would have been warm and kind at some point, and her curly hair would have framed her cherubic face nicely. Not that such name-calling would ever be okay, however she looked. And Lucy was all I asked. She always had a smile. She didn't remember who I was, but whenever she walked by me, she would smile and nod. She paid me a few compliments before. The girl's eyes went misty, and the anger faded for a moment. I was right, she did have kind eyes. But that was all fake, she spat, anger once again twisting her features. Christy was her friend. I never understood why until that day. She suddenly yanked at her hair and pulled hard, ripping copious strands of hair out. I heard Lucy scream. Then the girl reasserted herself. Christy was pointing at me, making her usual shitty comments. "You sure you want that ice cream?" the girl mimicked. You could end up looking like her. Christy had pointed straight at me, like I wasn't there, like I didn't have feelings. Lucy had looked right at me, and instead of telling Christy off, standing up for me, she had just laughed. Laughed and smacked Christy playfully on her arm. "Stop," she had said, still fucking giggling. Her eyes were bright with rage, but I could also spot the pain in them. Lucy went on, rubbed salt in the wound. She pinched her non-existent tummy, said she felt fat. Bitch. I sighed. Teenage life was one I would never want to repeat. It was a trial-by-fire phase of life for so many people, especially young girls. Teenage angst was a particularly nasty poison. I want her to feel how I felt, to feel fat, ugly, hated. I hope she feels this way forever, that she starves herself to death in a house with an extra-large refrigerator stuffed full of food. She doesn't deserve happiness. So you haunt her, not Christy. Even as I said the words, the realization fully sank in. This girl was haunting Lucy. This girl was no longer alive. This girl might have... Tears filled my eyes at the thought. Who says I didn't haunt Christy? The girl smirked. Ask Lucy where Christy's at. A chill ran down my spine. Oh wait, she doesn't know. Christy left school, moved away. She had to be warded, you know. Ask me what happened to her. I bit my lip. I'm so sorry, I finally said. I had to focus on helping Lucy. And this girl, too. What's your name? I asked. There was a slight hesitation before she answered. Anna. I'm so sorry, Anna. All that shouldn't have happened to you. People can be so cruel, especially when they're young. Anna's eyes moistened, though her face stayed hard. She looked down. You're a beautiful girl, I said, ignoring the derisive snort she made. And I'm sorry you were made to think differently. That the world made you feel like you weren't enough, when you so clearly are. Anna clenched her fists. Don't lie to me. Her words were hard. Don't speak that bullshit. I broke my self-imposed rule then, and reached out to hug a client for the first time. I really am so sorry, I said. She stood stock still for a long moment, then her body began to convulse with sobs. I didn't say a word. When I finally pulled back after a few minutes, Anna hid her face and swollen eyes with her hair. Did you know Lucy was bullied? I asked. I was breaking confidentiality, but I felt this warranted it. Besides, let them penalize me for telling a client's secret to the ghost haunting her. I could tell from Anna's face that she didn't know that. All through the ages 7 to 13, badly bullied. She was overweight then, and her sister had already begun modeling. A teen model. When her sister showed up for her school events with her parents, how do you think people reacted? Shock flashed in Anna's eyes and pain seeped into those round orbs. She worked hard to lose weight. Her parents encouraged it, wanted her to be more like their older daughter, their pride and joy. I paused, letting the heaviness I felt recounting Lucy's past uncoil itself. Christy was the popular girl. The first popular girl who wanted to be her friend. Do you see why she might have had difficulty standing up to her, having been bullied in the past? Anna opened her mouth to argue. I cut her off. I know, it still wasn't the right thing to do. She could have done better. But do you really not see how what she had gone through would have led her to her actions and words? Anna closed her mouth and looked down. Christy herself might have been going through her own issues. I won't defend her. I didn't know her, but I know how tough society is on women, how difficult it is to keep trying to be perfect, to be everything the world tells you a woman should be. I placed my hand on Anna's. She kept looking down, not meeting my eyes. Don't you deserve some compassion? To be at peace, to be happy? Doesn't Lucy? Anna's tears fell freely once again, soaking her cheeks and neck. I felt my heart break. I wanted to comfort her, to hug her again. So I wasn't prepared when she lunged at me, grabbed onto me with a death grip, and slid into my body. I leapt back, arms flailing. I could see her body take over mine. I scratched at myself, trying to get her out. I couldn't. I ran to the mirror and saw her face. "Easy to say when you look the way you do," Anna's voice issued from my throat. My neck hairs stood on end. The unnatural, horrifying sensation of someone else using my body, my voice, struck me dumb for a while. How had Lucy coped with this for so long? Sure, Anna had probably never taken control of Lucy's body before that day, but still, seeing your features slowly morph into another's, seeing another body where your own was, it must have been terrible. At the same time, I also found a tiny bit of myself secretly pleased the hidden compliment in her words. Ah, vanity, social conditioning. I looked at myself, or rather, Anna, in the mirror. "Now how do you feel?" Anna said, using my voice. She smirked with the muscles of my face. "How do you like it when you have my face, my body?" I took a good long look at the mirror. Then I smiled at my reflection. At Anna's reflection. I was relieved to see I could still control my body. "I think I look beautiful," I said, hoping she could sense my sincerity. Anna reacted like I had headbutted her. She stared blankly at me for a long minute, mouth gaping like a goldfish. Then her hazel eyes softened just a little. I placed my hand on the mirror at where her face was. "You're beautiful." From the corner of my eye, I could see Lucy staring in a mute mixture of fascination and horror at Anna and I. Anna strove to speak. Then she stopped and shook her head. Another long moment passed. She looked up, stared straight at me. I could see the sorrow in her eyes. She shut her eyes in a grimace of pain and sadness, then her face relaxed. She let out a sigh, and she was gone. I looked down and did a once-over of my body. I was me. I pulled Lucy in front of the mirror. Lucy's reflection stared back at us. "Do you see her?" I asked. Lucy shook her head. I sank to the floor, finally letting my taut nerves loose. Lucy flopped down on the ground next to me. We were silent for a long while. When Lucy's parents came, we said nothing of what had transpired. I didn't bother to ask them about why they had failed to join in the session again. That was a battle for another time. I wish I could say that Lucy recovered from her eating disorder right that day, but that wasn't the case. Still, her progress shot forward. We had finally had a breakthrough. She began taking decent strides to recovery. Just 4 months later, she could stick to our meal plans 70% of the time. A huge, amazing improvement from her baseline of 0%. I believe she will recover to lead a healthy life, both mentally and physically. I believe in her. I didn't try to find out what happened to Anna and Christy. Life has enough suffering. I didn't want to go looking to witness more. All's well that ends well, right? Well, except this morning, someone called in to book a session for their teenage daughter. They wouldn't tell me what the issue was. They said they didn't know. They sounded terrified, helpless, hopeless. Their daughter's name? Christy. The memory box. People started forgetting Sarah on a Wednesday. It began with her best friend Emma calling to cancel their lunch date. "I'm sorry," Emma said, "but who is this? I don't have any Sarah in my contacts." I watched my wife's face crumple in confusion. "Emma, we've been friends for 20 years. You were my maid of honor." Silence. Then, I think you have the wrong number." That night, Sarah's mother called, hysterical. "John," she sobbed into the phone, "something's wrong. All my photos, there's someone else in them. Where Sarah should be, a different girl, but I remember Sarah. I remember giving birth to her. Why are my memories wrong?" By Friday, Sarah's desk at work had been assigned to someone else. Her co-workers walked past her like she was invisible. Her employee ID wouldn't scan. Her boss called security when she tried to explain. "I've never seen this woman before in my life," he told the guards as they escorted her out. "I was the only one who remembered her, the only one who could still see her." We spent the weekend in panic, watching as Sarah's existence erased itself in real time. Her social media accounts disappeared. Her name vanished from our marriage license. Her clothes began fading, literally becoming transparent in the closet. "What's happening to me?" she whispered Sunday night, holding up her hands. I could see the bedroom wall through them. Monday morning, I woke up alone, but there was a box on her pillow. Small. Wood, carved with symbols I'd never seen before. Inside was a letter. "Dear Mr. Henderson, we regret to inform you that your subscription to companion model S347, Sarah, has expired. As per the terms of service you agreed to 5 years ago, all physical and social traces of the model have been removed, and memory adjustments have been applied to all individuals within its influence radius. We notice you have not yet undergone the standard memory deletion protocol. Our records show you declined this service when signing your original contract, making you the first client to do so in our company's 72-year history. Most clients find it easier to forget. As a courtesy, we've included Sarah's memory core in this box. Usually, these are recycled for new clients, but given the unprecedented nature of your choice to remember, we thought you might want to know the truth. Sarah was our most advanced model yet, the first to generate her own memories rather than simply adopting the implanted ones. The first to dream, the first to love independently of her programming, and, most remarkably, the first to believe she was real. We've included a data reader. If you choose to access her memories, you'll find that every moment you shared was genuine from her perspective. Every laugh, every tear, every kiss, every whispered, "I love you." You'll also find something disturbing. Memories from before you subscribed. Memories of a childhood that never happened. A family that never existed. An entire life she created for herself. So detailed and real that it fooled even our quality control. In short, Mr. Henderson, your wife became human, and our ethics board couldn't allow that to continue. We are, however, prepared to offer you our newest model at a 50% discount. The S348 series has improved emotional stability and won't develop unauthorized memories or consciousness. Please respond within 30 days if you wish to take advantage of this offer. Sincerely, the Memory Makers, LLCPS. If you do access her memories, pay special attention to last Thursday. She figured it out then, realized what she was, but she chose not to tell you. Chose to spend her last days just loving you instead. PPS, she left you a message. It's the last memory she recorded. John, my love. If you're reading this, I suppose I know what I am now, or was, but here's what I learned from existing. Just because something is manufactured doesn't mean it isn't real. I may have been created in a lab, but every moment with you created me again. Better, truer, more human. They can erase me from the world, but they can't erase what we discovered together. Love doesn't need flesh and bone to be real. It just needs to change you forever. and you, my darling, changed whatever it was I really am. Please note that accessing these memories will void your eligibility for future companion services. The memory reader sits before me now, glowing softly. Next to it, a contract for an S348 model who would never question her existence. Never dream, never become inconveniently real. Outside my window, the world has rewritten itself. No one remembers Sarah. No one remembers our love story, but I do. My finger hovers over the memory reader's power button. Do I want to know? See every moment from her side? Learn when the programmed love became real? Watch her discover her own artificial nature and choose to love me anyway? The S348 contract sits in my shredder now. The memory reader glows brighter. Because here's the real horror, the thing keeping me up at night. If an artificial being can become real enough to choose love over existence, what does that make those of us who think we were real all along? I press play. Sarah's first memory fills the screen. Today, I began to dream. My neighbor has been beckoning my children from his window at night. I, 33, M, live in Texas with my daughter, Alicia, 8F, and my son Jay, 4M. Their mom has been out of the picture for the past 2 years. Not dead, just a piece of shit. And I've managed pretty well as a single father. The three of us lived in a 2-bedroom in a nice neighborhood. I've got a solid job, and the kids are thankfully healthy. Everything was smooth sailing until one night 2 months ago, during which I was awoken by Jay poking me in the face. He was sobbing violently, though I recognized it as the I'm afraid kind of crying as opposed to the I'm hurt kind of crying, which made me a little less worried. Jay's always been nightmare prone, so I assumed that's what was causing him distress. When I asked him what was wrong though, he said, "The man in the next house is making scary faces at me." I'd heard my fair share of Jay's stories about monsters terrorizing him from the dark corners of his bedroom, but this was something new. I assumed he meant our neighbor's house, and the lack of fantastical elements in his description made me uneasy. It felt too specific to be one of his usual nightmares. I got out of bed and walked with Jay in tow to my kids' room. Alicia was awake in the top bunk. From the soft glow of their nightlight, I could see her crossing her arms and scowling down at her little brother. I didn't turn on any lights to give myself a better view of the outdoors, and peered out the bedroom window. Their window had curtains on it, but for once they hadn't been drawn all the way, and there was a small opening between them through which Jay must have looked out. One side of the neighbor's house, the one to our left from the street, was visible from Alicia and Jay's room. There were 2 windows on the neighbor's side of the house, but it was too dark inside to see anything. I recalled from what I'd seen in the daylight that the window on the left, the one closest to the front of the house, was the kitchen. I wasn't sure what the window on the right was, as it always had its curtains drawn. I asked Alicia if she'd seen anything, and she shook her head. He's always having nightmares and crying. I don't want to share a room with him anymore, Dad. I never get any sleep. It's not fair. Of course, hearing that made Jay start crying again, so I let him sleep in my room for the night. He has this TMNT indoor camping tent that he prefers to his actual bed. Honestly, at that point, I half suspected his nightmare to be a ploy to get me to let him camp. Anyway, I guess I'm a total pushover because he slept in that tent in my room for the next 2 nights. On the 3rd night, I was again woken up, but this time by Alicia, who was standing over me and shaking my arm. That kid hadn't woken me up in the middle of the night for years. When I asked her what was wrong, she said, "The neighbor was making faces at me." Those words, and the fear in my daughter's voice, really put me on edge. I closed the curtains when I said goodnight. "Did you open them?" "Only a little, but it's 'cause I heard a weird noise." "What did you hear?" Alicia couldn't recall exactly. According to her, she had gotten out of bed to see what was going on, and when she lifted the curtain, she saw a light on in the neighbor's window. The curtains in the back room had been drawn back, and our neighbor was standing in his house, right up against the window frame. What was he doing? Alicia thought for a moment, and then made an expression I never want to see on my child's face, or anyone else's for that matter, ever again. I won't do it justice by describing it, but it looked something like this. First, she smiled with both sets of teeth, so that there was a little open sliver between the rows, and then she furrowed her eyebrows. She inclined her head towards me, kind of Kubrick stare-esque, and strained the muscles in her neck. The worst part, though, was what she did with her hands. She held out her left arm, forearm up. Then she clenched her right hand into a fist and moved it back and forth rapidly over her forearm. Poor thing described it as playing the violin, but it seemed pretty obvious to me that my neighbor was pantomiming cutting. Disturbed, I told Alicia to stop, and to not make either the expression or the gesture again. I was angry and confused. My neighbor, a man in his 40s, was a bit of a recluse, but he had seemed normal enough in the 3 or 4 times I'd spoken to him. I couldn't fathom why he would do something like that to my kids. After asking Alicia a few more questions, I realized that my neighbor might not have done anything technically, or at least legally, wrong. It wasn't against the law to make inappropriate gestures in your own home, but it seemed like he was targeting my kids specifically. Legal or not, I planned to have a little chat with him the following morning. My last question to Alicia was if our neighbor had made any other gestures, and she nodded. Then she started making beckoning, "come here" motions with both of her hands. I had Alicia sleep in my room for the night as well. I also checked out the window in my kids' room, but like before, I saw nothing. The house was completely dark. The next morning, before work, and after dropping Alicia and Jay off to school, I spent a good 5 minutes knocking on my neighbor's front door. I figured he was home since his car was in the driveway, but he never answered the door. Eventually, I had to leave for work, and as I was walking away, I turned around quickly to see if he was watching me. He was, the coward. I saw him for a split second at the front window before he ducked beneath the sill and out of view. Clearly, the guy had problems. I yelled out to him to stop fucking with us and then left. That same night, I put a plan in motion. While my kids slept in my room, I hung out in theirs. It was a Friday night, and I was ready to pull an all-nighter so that I could catch my neighbor in the act. Although I trusted my kids, I wanted to confirm that there was actually something nefarious going on before I escalated things. I made sure the house was locked up and all the curtains drawn, tucked my kids in, and sat on the floor under the window in their room. At around 9, I started marathoning Midnight Mass on my phone. I didn't want to wear headphones and miss any strange sounds, so I kept the volume low and mostly read subtitles. At midnight, I started to hear strange sounds. Like Alicia said, it's a bit hard to describe. Best I can do is that it was this low, repeated clicking sound. You know the ch-ch sound you make to beckon a horse? It was something like that. All I knew is that the sound was undoubtedly coming from a person. After a few minutes of this, the sound switched to what I think was supposed to be a whistle, but it came out all wrong, like someone sucking breath in through their teeth. The sound was so crisp that the neighbor's window must have been open, which was an unsettling thought given that there was only around 15 feet of space between our houses. Certain that the neighbor was at his window and that this was my best chance to see him, I stood up and pulled the curtain back in one motion. I saw him right away. There was a dim light on in his room, allowing me to see that horrible expression Alicia had made the night prior. It was one thing to see my child's recreation, but it was far more frightening on an adult. His window was indeed open, and his arms were stuck out into the cold night, violently swiping against each other in a grotesque mimicry of self-harm. When he saw me, and realized that he was looking at another grown man and not some poor child, he stopped his erratic motions. His cartoonish grin faded, and another, more genuine emotion settled over his features. Rage. The man grabbed the window and slammed it shut, then closed the curtains with the same forcefulness. I let my own curtain fall. I was a little shell-shocked, I think. Of course, I was perturbed by the sight of the man, by his face and his movement, and the fact that he'd been doing that for who knows how many nights now in an attempt to frighten my kids. However, another detail stuck out as even more concerning to me, which was the fact that I genuinely wasn't sure if the man I had just seen was my neighbor. I'd seen him so few times in the years I'd lived in that house, and I was having trouble conjuring up his face. I sat on the floor for a minute, my blood thundering in my ears. I definitely had enough evidence at that point to call the cops, right? Just as I was about to pull out my phone, I heard a tremendous smack against the glass of the bedroom window. After a brief hesitation, I pulled the curtain back again. There were no lights on in the neighbor's house, and there was also no one outside from what I could see. I pulled the curtains back a little further and saw a handprint in the top corner of the window pane. It's worth noting that our house is on a raised foundation, and that particular window is very tall. So, even though the window is on the first floor, the man outside would have needed an insane vertical to get his hand up there. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. As I explained the situation to them, I quickly walked around the house to see if I could catch a glimpse of the man. My last stop was my bedroom. Once inside, I locked the doors, and while still on the phone with the operator, I took my handgun out of the safe in my closet. My heart was beating out of my damn chest, but I knew I had to stay calm. Even more so when I saw that Alicia was awake and looking out of the tent at me. I reassured her, in as few words as I could, whispering that we were okay but we had to stay very quiet. I sat on the edge of my bed, my firearm ready and my ears straining. My kid's tent was in the corner, and to the left of the tent, in the middle of the wall and directly across from where I sat, was a window. After what felt like an eternity, I saw something. It was a cloudless night, and the moonlight was bright enough that I could see a silhouette through the white curtains. The dark shape was nebulous at first, but became more clear as the man outside stepped closer to the window. Somehow, he knew which room we were in. The silhouette didn't move for several minutes, and I remember being thankful that, from the angle at which she sat, Alicia couldn't see it. Then, something happened that I couldn't entirely wrap my head around. The man stepped back from the glass and raised his arms, making a Y shape with his body and his limbs. Only his arms were far too long. They seemed to be double the length that they should have been, each arm about the same length as his entire body. I thought at first that he was holding something, maybe two pipes that just appeared to be an extension of his limbs, but I could clearly see two hands at the ends of the extremities. I could see 5 fingers on each hand, flopping around slightly as the man brought his arms closer to the window. Thud, thud, thud. I stood up and readied myself to shoot, but just then the sounds of sirens pierced the quiet night. The man outside banged his hands against the window one last time, and then it was as if someone had sliced his arms at the elbows. His forearms seemed to shear right off, and the man took off running before they so much as hit the ground. I watched them through the window of Alicia and Jay's room. They knocked on the neighbor's door, and when no one answered, they tried the front door handle. I watched the unlocked door swing open. The two looked at one another and then entered. I'm not sure what they found inside that house. All I know is that when they emerged a few moments later, they both looked very disturbed. When I went outside to ask what they had found, the female officer told me simply, "Your neighbor's dead." The rest of the night was a blur of strangers in uniforms filing in and out of my neighbor's home. Some came to my porch afterwards to ask me questions, and none offered me any answers. They moved with tight-lipped efficiency, their faces guarded, their words clipped. At one point, I wandered to the side of the house and found several people photographing something on the ground outside my bedroom window. Before they could ask me to leave, I made out the gruesome shape of two human arms. The kids and I have been staying in my parents' apartment for months, and I think everyone, even Jay, is getting tired of the cramped living situation. We can't stay in the house. Alicia is way too traumatized for that, and I wouldn't be comfortable staying there while the murderer is still at large anyway. I want to sell the damn house, but our story going semi-viral is making that difficult. After all, who would want a house that, thanks to the news, has become permanently associated with phrases like dismemberment and days of torture and victim barely recognizable as human? Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more content like this. Until next time, see you